just going to be the right wind, and fire is going to start in the right place, and it's going to burn through LA all the way to the ocean.
This is Tim Gilmore.
And this is Luciano Gamis.
And welcome to the No Small Wonder podcast, where there's no question too minuscule, no journey too broad, no wonder too small. So we'll be tackling every topic under the sun on this pod. But I mean, particularly there's a pressing issue that's been happening here in Southern California. I mean, as we're shooting today, Luch, you're in
Palm Springs. I left. I lost power on what the days are blending, but I lost power Wednesday night, I think, or Thursday night. So I was like, I'm out of here. I didn't get my apartment building didn't get power again for like 48 hours later.
LA is on fire, basically.
Absolutely.
And it seems it's weird because it's like we usually have like little brush fires every year. Sometimes they're in Santa Clarita, right? In that little dry area over there on 14.
Extremely dry.
And so they usually have a little fire over there, and that like gets put out, right?
I think
there was a fire on the
I think it's important to mention that we technically have like a fire season, which is
there's like annual,
which is I think it covers like the end of summer sort of thing. So like beginning of January, middle of winter seems like a very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, and it's usually like in one or a few areas. It's never like this to this magnitude. And what makes this very unique is that like there's fires that are popping off in all parts of LA Metro, and it's like one after the other, and then like Palisades, just like the whole city is just gone. And I mean, it begs the question, okay, what is happening, right? Like, are these natural fires? Because obviously the wind has been blowing, it's anywhere from 60 to 80 miles per hour. But that was on Tuesday. The winds have died down, right?
They've died down.
It's not as crazy as it was,
right?
But there's still fires popping off. And so it begs the question, right? What's going on?
To see some of the videos and some of I've been just watching TV the whole time, and to see the videos of the winds that Tuesday night, because I was in the office on Tuesday morning, and I saw it from my office building. I saw the fires like just happening, randomly smoke just creeping from the Palisade, like west side. And then getting home and then seeing the winds that night on Tuesday night with literally hurricane style winds in the middle of a neighborhood where everything's on fire. And I'm like, okay, this is bonkers.
Recipe for disaster.
Absolutely bonkers. But then I was there Wednesday morning. I'm walking pretzel around my block, and the winds are still massive because I'm like getting debris in my eyes as I'm walking.
It's like ashes and like little.
We didn't have goggles on, so I'm sure she got it worse than me.
For sure.
Like I'm over here, we're just walking. I'm like, okay, Wednesday's still freaking poppable. This wind is still very, very strong. Then creeps into Thursday. That's by the time I kind of like I left because of the lost power, but the winds are still relatively stronger than normal. And
they're stronger than normal, but I'll speak for myself.
30 miles per hour.
I'm over here in the valley.
But I don't even know if you guys were in like direct, I mean, I guess you were in the danger zones. But I don't know, like these gusts of winds are coming, like when I see the maps on like channels, they're like small sectors. Like coming right over that mountain where the fires are, and then coming over right into the east side where the other Eaton fires are. And they were literally showing a map on the Weather Channel how like the middle of LA, central LA, which is not in a danger zone, was not getting as impacted by this wind gust current. It was like coming right in between LA, in between. So it's like the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire, we're getting the heavy doses of it. That's very fascinating how these gusts of wind are working.
It's really weird, I guess, how the wind is working and just how the weather is in different parts of LA, right? So I'm in a really weird spot where it's like I'm in like in 10 to 15 miles radius in this direction, there's a fire, right? But like where I'm at, it's like it's a little more industrialized. There's more like businesses and concrete. I'm not like directly near any like, you know, mountains and things like that.
Yeah.
And is it windy? It's much windier than I would like for it to be. But
sure.
you go over the hill on the west side, obviously the weather is just a little different over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, like I said, like there's definitely conditions for fires to spread, right? This windy weather. However,
Dry and then unusually
it's dry. It is
There's
dry.
like a 0% of humidity at the same time right now,
It's so weird.
which makes this fire so much more stickier because there's no water in the air.
It's the perfect storm for fires to just go run rampant.
Okay, so then tell me what your unsettled feelings are kind of like reserved, or where your unsettled feelings, or where these, I mean, I guess from your perspective, I know you brought this up multiple times to me. How do you feel in contrast to like the perfect storm, natural weather conditions, as to now the very, this pervasive idea of like, okay, this is not as natural as we may think it is. Because I mean, that is a growing conversation in our city right now. Everyone is kind of tapping into it, and I want to hear what you got to say. And then let's watch maybe a video to kind of give us some support.
So just to kind of lay it up, right? Like whenever there's calamity, right? Catastrophe, whenever.
I mean, get real close to the mic. Yeah, get real close to the right. He's like, let me tell you something.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Right, there's collusion. But no, I mean, like whenever things start popping off all around me, right, I have to take a step back and start asking questions. You know what I'm saying? Because like I'm open to I mean, like I said, we're in Southern California. Like fires happen, dude. Right? But like this is a little different.
I mean,
and so
not a little, it's massive.
Right.
But yeah, but I get
it's different.
hugely
Like
different.
it's not. And so you turn on the TV, you turn on like, you know, social media, and you hear all of these different things as to
what's
what,
going on.
and I'm like, wait a minute. And then if I hear it, and then I hear people talking about like, oh, it's just climate change. Oh, it's just this. And,
I saw people getting interviewed on KCAL9 saying, and then this woman, her house had just been burnt down. They're in literally Altadena, and they're like, she's devastated, she's crying. And then literally the thing that comes out her mouth is like, it's that climate change. We really have to focus up and make sure we corral together and on the next midterm elections. And I'm like, wait a minute, woman.
dude,
This is not the time to start saying like we need to get like more like climate change believers in office, which I understand maybe that could be a solution. I don't know the reality of that, but it's not the time for that. Like, do not start like spewing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes to show that equally people are on the opposite spectrum, where everyone is shitting on the progressive liberal California leaders for their kind of
and their response.
their response. So it's on both sides of the spectrum. This woman's just devastated. She's like, we need to fight back by these natural causes of climate change. While the opposing conversation is, well, no, you guys just need to fucking step up your reinforcements of how you respond, because your government already that's elected is not doing what it needs to be doing. It's very fascinating because it's all going back to like, let's point.
And it's a lot of noise, right? When there's a lot of noise, right? And then you hear people talking, because I'm seeing people post, and they're like, I'm tired of people posting all this like misinformation and these conspiracy theories. I'm like, wait a minute, because during COVID, there were people that were saying things that were considered conspiracy theories for a long, long time. And now that it's coming to the light, nobody wants to say anything. Nobody wants to say, oh yeah, these people might have been right. Like nobody wants to say anything. And so whenever I hear people like saying, oh, this is misinformation, I'm like, okay, but like what now it forces me to dig, right?
Yeah.
Because yes, fires happen all the time, right? But like, why are they just popping off in these random places? And then you see one snippet of archery over here, and then you see one snippet of this over here.
I mean, I'm like, one of them came from Andrew Huberman, one of the most credible fucking sources.
Dude, he saw someone light a fire and then called. I'm like, yo, this is insane. So that is something that, and watch this. And you also see a little bit of like lax and a little bit of
over.
Right.
You hear her, I'm sure she's coming through the mic. I'm like,
No, you're good. We have a special guest. Why don't we let her go? Pretzel the pod.
With their diaper.
I know. But not like the evasiveness and the ambiguity from our political leaders responding to this cataclysm. Like that is so telling. And then if Trump has anything to say about it, right?
Oh.
Like, oh, this guy's lying, this guy, da 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 da. And I'm like, people are so quick to hate Trump for anything he says about anything. But like if he's right, like some years down the line,
Yeah.
we're not gonna credit him because he's a horrible human. He hates women. He's a white supremacist. Like I'm like, all right. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm more anti Gavin Newsom than I am pro Trump.
And why do you bring those two into conversation? Is it
Well, just because he's our immediate like sitting governor.
Right.
And Trump has weighed in on, some of the stuff that's going on. And people are just so quick to be like, oh, forget what Trump has to say, this and that, blah, blah, he's a liar, whatever, right? And I'm just like, man, this reminds me of like what happened during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, okay, like, now it's time to start digging. This is no coincidence. I don't think this is just a coincidental, like, oh, this fire just happened because of whatever. It's like, no, like something's happening. And I'm very curious to see what happens and how that plays out.
Okay, so then let's watch a video to kind of give us
watch some of the stuff we've been working on.
Yeah, let's react to it and see what's happening.
Spencer Pratt has just announced plans to sue the state of California after he and wife Heidi Montag lost their home in the Palisades fire. Let's hear this out. So in a new TikTok live with Perez Hilton, Spencer details what went down in the Palisades. He says there's absolutely no way that this was caused by an electrical power line because there are no electrical power lines up there. In this still shot from his TikTok, you can see it's up in the hill before it gets to the residential area. There are no power lines, there's no electricals, anything. He says he 100% believes that this is arson. He said initially that there were planes that were coming and tending to the fire, but they eventually left, and they left early because I guess there was an airstrike with Biden coming into town, or at least that's what he was told. After they left, the fire picked up. He said he tried calling 911, he tried getting the fire department out there, nobody came. He watched in a security footage camera, and still no fire trucks came to tend to their house. He said they live next to a water reservoir, and that when he went to go to his house recently, that the chain was still locked on the reservoir, meaning they never even accessed it. Now it's being reported that suspects are being detained on suspicion of arson. LAPD appears to be warning local HOAs. And now we're seeing reports of reservoirs in Palisades being empty, in addition to fire hydrants being empty. This is not due to crazy winds, because we only had crazy winds on Tuesday. And Spencer even says that before the planes left that were tending to the Palisades fire, the winds weren't even that bad yet. Now, I'm not some climate change denier, but this is a lot more than that.
Your initial thought, because I said that to you.
You did. I see this.
Watching it now.
Okay, watching it now. Mm-hmm. I guess it's fascinating that we have a commonality of skepticism. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating because
for skepticism.
For skepticism. I think we celebrate skepticism on this show, and I think that's the premise of the show. So if you don't have skepticism, you get the fuck out.
Yeah, right.
My skepticism grows when I watch something like that, especially when they're highlighting two characters that are like directly infected by this whole traumatic experience, because they're coming from an extremely emotional state, so emotional to the fact that they're out here trying to sue the city.
Right.
And with probably limited, well, I wouldn't say probably, an excessive amount of limited knowledge of what's happening. And what I mean by that is like, we're 4 years, I think what you brought up is fascinating. We're 4 years post-COVID. Yeah. And to this day, we still get new information on how the administration responded to this whole calamity that happened across the world, and how we can particularly see like, okay, there were some bad parties in this particular situation. Mm-hmm. So to this day, right now, to call it like arsenic is a stretch, although I know there's evidence from people in videos, with Andrew Huberman being one, another person being another. They arrested this person in Kenneth fires, but the cops came out just I think yesterday saying like that particular individual was not linked to this fire, so they potentially either let him go, or they just didn't have any evidence further to kind of pin the whole Kenneth fire on him.
Yeah,
he was just going around trying to like fucking blow up trash cans. But
like that doesn't contribute to. Like,
I'm not saying that doesn't mean that So then that guy must have been the reason for the Palisades
I'm
fire.
not saying,
I'm
but
saying
like,
that there could be malicious people acting on the opportunity, right? Because there's people that are looting at that moment. There's desperate people using this calamity as an opportunity to like either even the playing field, like I mentioned to you in an Instagram kind of joke text. I'm like, oh, these homeless people are trying to be like, yeah, I'm trying to bring you to my world. Let's get
mhm,
rid of your home so you can come to my
right,
land.
right.
So like there's a bit of a play here for the extremely deprived individual to kind of use this and be like, well, it's kind of like it's causing more chaos. But I think to insinuate that there was already these malicious individuals coming in the forefront to plan and orchestrate this highly technical fire display from the Palisades into Eden, I think is a little unlikely as of now from what we have kind of collected in terms of knowledge. And that's limited knowledge from what the LAPD, the fire the communities, and all these people are able to like divulge to the average consumer at the moment. So with that limited knowledge, I can't necessarily subscribe to saying, "Oh yeah, I believe 100%." Now talking about what the video mentioned about like the San Ynez Reserve, a reservoir being empty or not necessarily used. I read an article talking about it that yeah, that is the case. So the San Ynez Reservoir was not necessarily capable of being used at the moment. So they were like going, it was under construction, it was not used. And that could have played into the factor of like, okay, yeah, that had a significant impact on there. But I think they had interviewed on this, okay, on this. I was reading an article and I was talking about how one of these firefighters, a general manager for the Department of Water and Power as well, on these are retired firefighters and things of that nature. They brought him onto this article talking about like how impactful would the San Ynez Reservoir could have been or not been because it wasn't used. And I think the individual was talking about like, well, yes, that would have helped, but it wouldn't have been some major impact. Like, wouldn't have stopped the fires. They still used 3 1 million gallon reservoirs in the Palisades to try to impede this fire, but it was too strong, too massive, too powerful to even make a blimp into the fire. And which is why I think even in the article I mentioned like hydrants were a huge problem. I just
Mhm.
read yesterday, I think yesterday, the governor, Gavin Newsom, sent out an investigation. He declared an investigation into the city's uh, the hydrants and water supply and water pressure and trying to and try to figure out like what happened, how was this capable of happening, where the San Ynez Reservoir wasn't used and then the hydrants were losing power or were losing pressure or didn't have or were dried out in a sense. So he came out with an actual statement saying that he's going to do an internal investigation on that, which is pretty fascinating. But nonetheless, to watching that video immediately brings me back a little bit, and I'm very skeptical to listen to somebody maybe that is equally as uninformed as I am, but to
Mhm.
start to like see patterns of like, oh well, there's a guy burning a trash can near Andrew Huberman. Well, that must mean that this guy is also the person that might have just lit a 20,000 acre fire deliberately. And then don't even get me started on that little what was that email blast from the HOA president in Baldwin
Yeah,
Hills. It
yeah.
was like these highly trained, skillful arsenic players that were,
Well, they said
um,
that they had gotten information from the LAPD, from a
yeah, but
trusted
then
source in the
they,
LAPD.
yeah, and then she goes back and says it into the conversation like, if these claims are true, we should be very careful. It's like, first, it's a source that no one has confirmed who they are. It's just a woman
Okay.
that is the president of HOA in Baldwin Hills, which is not necessarily relatively close to the fires, and yet has now authority to say like, hey, like these are arsenic
No, but what's
creep
interesting is that that what she said on the thing, it says it seems like they're targeting very like
affluent.
affluent areas,
There's a
which is
Sylmar
interesting because you
fire.
talk about West
How
LA.
affluent is a Sylmar fire?
I don't know. There's some affluent areas everywhere.
Okay, so then that statement is
So look,
bogus then.
West Hills, Topanga, Palisades, Hollywood. Like these are all areas that like even the Hollywood Hills, like a lot
The
of these
Hearst
fires are
fire, there was
happening.
one in Acton for crying out loud. The Hearst fire and the
Mm,
Acton one. Oh,
Fires are
so
always
there's just this
happening in
major.
active.
Oh, so then now all of a sudden it's because they're just random.
Well,
But
look, that's
you
look,
can't
listen.
blame randomness on two and then say the other ones are targeted.
Well, okay, so look, that's what she said,
I know,
right?
but I
She
think it's
there's a
bogus.
she's drawing a correlation, right? And so that's not information that I would just say, oh, like, she doesn't know what she's talking about, or she's just making some outlandish claim. She's trying to make people aware that live in that association, just in case if you see suspicious stuff going on. And you know what?
And to
It
use
actually reminds me of
an
what?
uncredible source to help propagate the idea that, hey, this is what's happening.
What, someone in LAPD?
That she knows. We don't know who that is, what their association is.
And it's not credible because she
Well,
didn't. He didn't.
she
She didn't
didn't
give a
name. She didn't
name.
name
She
any.
didn't.
Well, how do you? I can say that. Hey,
But listen.
I got
But
it from
listen.
I got it
I don't
from.
think that. I don't think that someone would put out a notice like this if they didn't think that they could trust the people that they were. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's trying to make people aware of what's going on around them, and
I
so
think
they
it's
can be
one way
on.
to say,
Like,
like, hey,
I'm
there
not
could
gonna.
be
I'm not just gonna
possible
just
arsenic.
write her off.
I, I
Like,
I don't think it's
you know what I'm
writing her
saying?
off. I think it's recognizing the bogusness in her delivery to try to like stout a bit of fear, so that way people are on high alert.
Well, she said just be on the lookout. Like,
Well,
did you
that
see
could
that
be
video
that's a
where they
conversation.
where they
That's a
tried to stop that
that's a different
person?
delivery, being like, hey, there could be arsenic plays.
So,
There's
okay, so let's
obviously
just
video
read
that
it. Can we just
supports
read
it.
it so
Yeah, let's
people
read it.
can
Why
make
don't you
their
read it?
own
Why don't you read it?
freaking
Read it.
goodness? Because I read it and my mind goes somewhere, but you're saying that it could be bogus. So let's just read it. So dear neighbors, this is from Shirley
Really
Worrells, the president of
Worrells.
the BHEHOA.
Yeah.
Um, dear neighbors, I
We don't
know
even
that
know how
everyone.
true this is. The person hasn't even come out. I even looked it up online. People have made articles about her seeking to like claim if this source is real or this like actual newsletter is real. I don't even know how true it is, but go ahead.
Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Let's just read it. Dear neighbors, I know that everyone is on pins and needles over the fires all over LA County, and I don't want to alarm you, but I've received the following information from a well-sourced person in LAPD. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. The LAPD is pretty sure, is pretty sure that the fires are
Pretty
being
sure.
caused
Pretty
by an
sure. That's
arsonist.
That's fair.
A very savvy arsonist that may know a lot about wind patterns and fire science. The arsonist seemed to be targeting affluent areas that abuts brush fires. Our community needs to be very vigilant for any suspicious activity. Please spread the word. Right now, they are fighting our brush fire that has started in Topanga. Please take this seriously. Make sure that you are monitoring your cameras. If your dogs are barking, investigate. I will ask ADT to step up their patrols in the neighborhood. If this information is true, we could very well be targets. Is it bogus?
I mean,
Is it like
she has every right,
what?
and I don't think it's bogus for her fear and her reasoning to potentially reach out to her fellow neighbors to have them be
Yeah.
watchful of fire starters. I think that's absolutely okay. To then say, like, I reached out to a well-informed LEP officer who's pretty sure
Yeah.
that these are all started by skillful, savvy weather and wind and
Like
desert
they know what they're doing.
savvy individual. Like to start to come
Basically,
out
like
with those claims, I'm
they
like,
know where to like start a fire, and they know if the wind is blowing in this way, then it could spread in that
yeah.
way. Like
I mean,
they're trying to say that this is like a trained person, and you know what that kind of reminds me of?
what?
You heard about Antifa during the
Then which riots?
the George Floyd riots?
Yes, of course,
and all that.
like in
And
Memphis,
there
they're
were
like kind of
people.
like breaking windows to try to
Well,
like
this is everywhere.
like yeah.
Even in LA, like there were people that were there just to protest, right?
Yeah,
But then there was people who
it
were
was
like
already,
armed,
but that's
who were throwing bombs and just doing all kind of stuff. And this is like a very like left extremist like
and
group of people
I see what you're saying.
who like were basically had their own agenda, right? To use these as a platform in order to basically tear down the establishment of
To create more
whatever
chaos.
and
To
to create chaos.
It's
And
anarchy.
so like that's where my mind goes when I hear stuff like this, where
Okay.
there
And I
could
don't
be
think that's wrong.
arsonists
Yeah.
and there could be arsonists that are like maybe targeting stuff. And some of this stuff probably is natural because of all these winds and stuff like that. But I could definitely see where there could be a group of people that are just trying to burn LA to the ground.
So then I think I would follow that up with saying initially, I agree with your perspective, and I agree with Shirley's perspective that hey, the intention is to let's be watchful because
Mhm.
people are going to use this calamity or this situation to their advantage. Now, that is a whole different conversation from how I interpreted this newsletter or this email blast, from a perversion of, hey, this is the reasoning these things are happening, and it's going to continue because these malicious people are going to continue to like robustly advance this
That's
fire.
not what I got.
So then I'm like, I don't see it as like, hey, initially this was a tactful, like skillful individual or individuals that are like, hey, this is going to be the right time to strike. The humidity is going to be at 0. The winds are going to be at 90 the next couple of nights. Like, let's go after the Palisades for. And then there's like fucking controversy. I mean, I've heard. I think I even spoke to one of my buddies at LEDWP, who gave me the information that they already used 3 million gallons over there in the Palisades. They were exhausted. The pipes were getting like super non-pressurized because everyone's using freaking water, and especially the fire trucks. But he was giving me information how he was like hearing through the grapevines of like people talking about how, well, people are talking about how like Jeffrey Epstein's house was up there, or maybe like P. Diddy's, and like all these houses are like burning evidence.
Paris Hilton
like,
and all
it was a
that.
tactical, like skillful, again, play to like remove some sort of evidence, remove some sort of any sort of like house or
it was definitely like
that kind of could put somebody into it.
I mean, bro, celebrities and multimillionaires are living in all of these locations that are getting burnt down.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Like, they were canceling NBA games.
Oh, I know. NFL games had to move to Arizona.
NFL games, right? It's funny. I went to a pro run yesterday and saw Bones Highland like randomly out of nowhere. He just popped up.
Is he still playing for the Clippers?
He had Clippers gear on, and there's a couple of his homies out there too. But I thought that was funny. But so a lot of people that have a ton of money are getting like affected by this.
And I think a lot of people that don't have a lot of money are equally as getting affected.
For sure.
This.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
I don't think it's I don't think a fire can be controlled, obviously, right?
I mean, no, there's no way
like,
to sit here and be like, oh, I want to blow this house up. But like these people, whoever I guess is being alleged to do this, it's more of like a chaos thing. It's more like,
absolutely.
And so reading what she said, she's like, listening to this person, they say that it could be someone who knows what they're doing and who is just trying to wreak havoc, right? So be on the lookout.
Okay, so then let's watch a video that I sent you that kind of gives us another perspective that I'm sort of kind of utilizing as a frame of reference when thinking about these fires.
Okay.
I talked to a fireman once. This is one of the reasons that freaked me out. And he was telling me, he goes, dude, one day, he goes, it's just going to be the right wind and fire's going to start in the right place and it's going to burn through LA all the way to the ocean and there's not a fucking thing we can do about it. I go, really? He goes, yeah, we just get lucky. He goes, we get lucky with the wind. He goes, but if the wind hits the wrong way, it's just going to burn straight through LA and there's not going to be a thing we can do about it. Because these fires are so big, dude. When they're talking about like thousands of acres that are burning simultaneously with like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And the wind's just blowing embers through the air, and those embers are landing on roofs, and those houses are going up, and they're landing on bushes, and those bushes are going up, and everything's dry. And once it happens in a way where it's so spread out that there's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do.
You just have to evacuate, right?
Nothing they can do.
What do you think when you hear that?
So when I hear that, in my mind, I mean, it's just interesting because I think about like everything that happened up to this point that they talk about like politically with like shutting down the water off and from the NorCal supply to SoCal with like the rain and all that, because there was this like fish that was like going to be extinct and like Gavin Newsom wanted to save it. I think that was complete horse baloney. Like that was super whack. And then you talk about like just because obviously you were talking about how houses have been getting like let go of their fire insurance, but that has been supposedly happening over the course of time up to this point. But particularly, right, like as of the last month or so, there was an upheaval of a ton of like it's just this weird timing. And then you talk about this like wind warning that happens at this point in time, and then fires start popping off,
Mhm.
right? And and during this condition of time, it's like enough fires start to pick up in areas that are so like, cause think about that, the Eden Fire and the Palisades Fire. Those are so far from each other. You think an ember just traveled all the way through the canyons and just landed in, like, you know what I'm saying? Like these are separate, like, and so when I think about that, I'm like, okay,
But the
like
thing is,
this is the perfect recipe for like if this fire pops off, this fire pops off, and now these fires can just develop and spread and do this and that. So I think what he's saying is very plausible, right? But does that mean that because watch this, what he's saying is that like if the winds are right, then it could create a horrible situation for a fire, right?
hmm
Regardless to how it starts.
hmm
What he's saying, I don't think necessarily supports that these fires are natural. But I think what he's saying is that if the right conditions happen with the right fire, like it could turn into a really bad situation and
what,
LA
what,
is doomed.
yeah, what it's been so far.
And so
Because like
that's essentially
think about it.
what where my mind goes.
Okay, so I'm currently looking at the TV right now, and we're barely at 11% containment in
For which fire?
The Palisades fire.
That is insane.
22,000 acres, 11% containment. The first 3 days, they had like zero containment.
Yeah. So it just burned and burned and burned
think how
and
much
burned.
water had been already used to try to like stop this fire.
Yeah.
If they gone to 3 million like that, they're probably going through millions upon millions like per hour.
But it's just crazy to think about because I hear that like they're using a ton of water. Then I hear like other firefighter stories where people are using like little bags of water to try to put stuff out where there's no water over here, but all of a sudden like, oh,
Well, think
we've used
about
water and there's just not enough water. And I'm like,
Okay, so this is where you
okay,
have to start to get
what?
the frame of reference. So let me give you the frame of reference because I think this is indicative
Because there's
to this thing.
firefighters that are talking about for every 10 like hoses that they hook up to try to put this stuff out, it's like they're not getting anything. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, but what about the water that we're talking about?
Yeah.
This 3 million gallons of whatever, right? And so that doesn't really add up, right?
J-
But it
j-
makes sense though when you talk about legislation being passed to not like allow water to come down here for any kind of like
So,
disaster that could occur for a seasonal
so
fire.
NBC got a person who's the chief engineer in the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and they previously said that there's about 4 times as much demand on the Palisades system as there typically is on a given day.
Well,
So
yeah,
to
there's more
think
than they can
about,
handle.
so then to sit there and think about like, yeah, oh my God, there's not enough water. That may be rightfully understood because there's just so much demand from fire trucks using pipelines to get water from the Los Angeles
Yeah.
Department, the reservoirs trying to support. I think the same chief officer, one of them, said that yes,
Okay, but that's just for Palisades. Like you got to think about all these other fires where people are talking about like there's no why isn't there any water? Like I get it,
I feel
Palisades.
like the Palisades is the main one because it's the biggest one. Everyone's
Well,
talking about there's no
watch
water
this.
there.
That's fair, but like they're
Okay,
also
but it's
right
not
by the
fair.
water. What the heck?
What do you?
Like that reminds me of the Maui thing. It's like it's basically an island, right? The I forgot what what's the city called in Maui?
Maui. It was Maui.
Was it Maui?
It was
But it was
Maui.
like a
It was
specific
Maui.
like city or whatever. And they're
No, it was
talking
Maui.
about it, whatever. It was Maui. But like they're talking about how like because even in that video in the first video that we talked about, they talked about how like there was just a tad bit of passive neglect, right, with the firefighters and the air sky whatever team. And like they're just like
Okay, there we go. That's potentially explainable as well.
what?
Biden was here Monday night. I mean Tuesday or Monday. I forget when. Okay, so Monday night he was here. Tuesday he was supposed to be going to Joshua Tree to like unveil a monument. And Tuesday is obviously when the fires broke out.
Yeah.
So him being in there Tuesday, they shut down a lot of the actual airport flights and a lot of flying.
I remember. Yeah, they
because
grounded
he's there
some
in the LA. He was right by my office, like in Westwood area. So he's right there.
Biden was in Westwood?
I mean, I'm sure because there was cops that shut down the whole street. So I don't know exactly where it was, but cops shut down my whole street on Santa Monica Boulevard. That was
Okay.
Monday night and Tuesday morning. And then I get to the office, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, Biden's here." Biden was here last night, and he's here because he's going to Joshua Tree. I was like, oh, that makes sense why they probably like shut down the whole fucking street. So there was so many cops, but there was nothing on like Atlas Citizen hat. There was no like conversation about why there's so many cops outside. But regardless, that statement has some validity to it. What I'm trying to say is that yes, the flighting was not shot down, but the flighting was limited. Even the helicopters, the airplanes for water were limited in the beginning of this fire because they were like, hey, there's also, I don't know what the rule.
But even if there's not a ton
is,
of,
like,
even if there's not a ton of water, if they respond soon enough, the fire doesn't get that bad.
I mean,
do you agree with that?
So then here's another complication. Did you realize that the video that fire trucks couldn't even get to Palisades because all the cars just abandoned, all the people just abandoned all their cars in the middle of the freaking street, and there was a one way in, one way out.
There was like a warning.
Have you been to Palisades?
Yeah, I've been.
There's not many streets that go.
There was definitely there was like a warning that went out. It was like, leave your cars now or you're gonna die or something like that. I was like, what?
It's because they were in traffic. Everybody was trying to.
Well, yeah.
But then they couldn't because there's too much traffic going in that. There's so much congestion.
What about the sky? What about the sky response? What about the airplanes that had the water?
Well, they came in, I think, obviously later.
Because they even talked about it. They talked about that on the video as well, how they were kind of slow in their response as well.
That's what I'm saying. I think that is related to the flights not allowed, not like the no flying zones at the moment.
Okay, so
so they were trying to do ground control, right? They're trying to go in there and be like, hey, the fire trucks, which Palisades relies heavily on if there's a fire, they rely on the fire trucks to come in here and to have a direct pipe to the LA Department of Water to be able to utilize unlimited amounts to just continue to blast.
Yeah.
Fire trucks had a difficulty getting there, obviously. People had a difficulty evacuating, obviously, because there's so much there's so much congestion in that little city.
Yeah.
And then they're limited to being able to do air like flights and stopping the fire through air at the time. So it's like it was a recipe of like just uncertain, like the circumstances.
They're stopping flights, like commercial flights.
Of course, commercial flights.
They have their own,
but I think there was also like a no fly because
aircrafts that carry water.
Even KCAL9 and things of that nature, like the news media and LAPD, they were talking about it. That Tuesday morning, I remember I came back home and I was watching the TV and they were talking about how they couldn't even get cameras up in the air to like survey the circumstance or survey the fire at the time because they're like, we're like not allowed to go into the air at the moment because the president's in the house or president's nearby.
They're not allowed to go in the air because the president's nearby.
I believe so.
So let houses burn down. Because the president's in
but the Palisades relies heavily on fire trucks anyways to come in here and blast it.
Okay, so
but at that time on Tuesday, it wasn't at the level that it needed a goddamn air support to come drop down water while people are still in the houses. It's like, hey guys, like your houses are burning down. Let's just drop air support to drop water.
Okay, so this is let me tell you where my mind is at right now with this, because I'm in my mind I'm drawing like this correlation between like what had happened in Maui and this.
I don't even know what happened in Maui really, but obviously
it's a very similar kind of like story where there's just this kind of slow neglect and kind of response, and then when addressed,
neglect is a strong word though.
Okay,
they're acting like people are like turning face, like, oh, let's just not work.
But like
that's neglect.
Okay, watch this. This is because like it's just not a very right.
It's not a quick response.
It's not a quick response. It's not because it's not
everything happens so fast.
Fair, that's fair enough. But like, because they put out like, so I think about that. I think about like how things responded around that phenomenon, and it's just super fishy. It's like, and you talk to the elected officials, and they kind of turn a blind eye, and they kind of give these like weird responses, and it's like, okay, do you even care? And like, you know what I'm saying? And so you talk about Karen Bass, she goes on, hold on. Even Karen Bass, she goes on and they're asking her questions. There's one time where they're asking her questions and she's just like super silent. She has
because it's trying to come at her, bro. I saw that. I was like, oh damn.
Bro, and she's like left the country. She's not even in this country at the time. I'm sure she was doing something important and this kind of popped off, whatever, you know. But like you can just tell like it wasn't Yeah, it just wasn't like top high on her priority list, right? And then you see Gavin Newsom talking in the streets with people, and he's like, I don't know, it's something that's rubbing me the wrong way about this. And then you talk about the arsony stuff, and they're just like, oh yeah, like there's no conclusive evidence. We don't think
But
that
that makes
it's
more sense to you.
arsonery. But I'm like,
That doesn't rub you in the wrong way. All these sort of claims of arsenic, savvy, skillful,
yes, yes.
weather
But watch
people
this.
that
Hold on, but
have
watch this.
high
And then
tech.
an arsonist person comes up, like, and that the citizens made their arrest. And they're like, oh, there's no real probable cause, this and that. But
Yeah.
it's like, okay, but like, there's unusual fires that are like, there's like a tree is like just on fire, and it's like everything else
You know
is
what?
good.
Almost there was
It's like,
so
hold on,
let me explain something
what?
to you how unusual you may believe it is. I was at so then to give you context when I mentioned earlier in the podcast or earlier in the show when I said that my apartment lost power
Yeah,
for I think Wednesday night, Thursday, I forget what day it was now. But the reason why I lost power and people in my neighborhood all came out when we lost power. This is like about 10 p.m. I run out of my apartment building and I see my entire block is like outside and they're all looking at my apartment next to me. And
yeah,
then my neighbor is like, yo, a freaking electrical transformer. You know, when you look up into your neighborhoods and you see like these big poles that are holding like their electrical wire, and then in
yeah,
some of these posts, there's like a huge transformer. There's like this big, heavy mechanical thing that is sort of like I'm sure these transformers are like circulating the energy and
yeah,
being able
yeah,
to
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
transmute it in some case, like to make it smooth or efficient or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. All my neighbors are like out there already. So I was late to the party when I get out there, and they were already out there, and they were looking at the transformer. And all these other neighbors from down the street come out. And they're like, "This transformer just sparked. It had an electrical like I don't know mishap. It sparked, and then my neighbors like, and the tree that it's right next to started to catch on fire at the top.
Well,
So
yeah,
they
that's the
called the
spark in the freaking
department of
transformer.
they called the fire department and they came and like when I got outside, let me tell you, I get outside to see this and I see the commotion. 2 minutes later, the fire truck's already here. And they go and they check it and they're like, okay, there's no fire. Your guys are good. Okay, we're leaving. We got other things to fry. But I'm like, that's fascinating to talk about like random situations in which fires just come about. And I'm like, that could have been an instance. Like if that thing
And
were to
look
stay
how
lit,
fast the fire department came.
absolutely. They're all like this. They're borrowing fires from other states, and supposedly I saw a video from like Mexico, which I highly doubt.
Yeah,
But like they're borrowing from everywhere. We're borrowing planes from Quebec. I was on
yeah.
TV watching. They're like, oh, this is the Quebec fire fire plane
Yeah,
that we're
even
borrowing.
you said Mexico, right? Yeah,
I
I
saw a
heard
video
something
about
about
Mexico. I don't
I heard
believe
something
that.
about Mexico. I don't know, but I guess
Mexicans don't give a damn. Just
right.
I would be supportive
Yeah,
of like, don't worry
we're only
about
a huge sanctuary
just
cities.
don't worry about these
We're a
Americans that
huge
don't care
proponent.
about you guys. Why are you coming over here and saving them?
California is the biggest proponent of
That's
sanctuary
true
cities
though.
for Mexican
I
immigrants.
mean, it
So
is more
maybe they
It is
might.
more it's more Hispanic than actually American now. So
Yes, but I'll say this.
this is our state. This is our state.
Yes, I'll say this. There's a lot of speculation for a number of different like um I guess derivatives for where these fires are coming from, how elected, how different, I guess how the city's responding, how the
Hmm.
governor's responding, and all these different things. And people are saying, "Oh, don't politicize it," right?
Yeah.
Like the left wants this and
Hmm.
they don't care, and the right is spreading conspiracy
Yeah.
theories and misinformation. I think that like there's a lot going on, right? And it can definitely lead someone like you, someone like me, to just ask a heavy number of questions as
Yeah.
to okay, what is actually going on? I don't really know what to believe 100%. But what I do know is, in my mind, and this is, I guess, where I'm at in conclusion, I have precedent. Like when really bad things happen, you know, typically the stuff that's claimed to be misinformation and conspiracy theories, sometimes I don't immediately discount those,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because look what happened with COVID,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 100%.
And so it's really hard for me to
I agree.
sit here and believe the stuff that Gavin Newsom says, right? And Karen Bass and some of these elected officials that have shown that they don't always have our best interests in mind. And so when they come on the pulpit and they come on, and address the media and they give these like little wishy-washy whatever responses that aren't super clear, I'm like, what incentive do they have to be super transparent with the citizens of Los Angeles, right? Like I just don't really have faith in them. And so I can see where emotionally I can be triggered when I see stuff that doesn't go along with the mainstream narrative. And there's this like little side story, and I'm like, wait, what's that? What's that? What's that? And I have this kind of like acorn,
Yeah.
like, no, that deserves questions. Like, we need to ask questions about that. And I think I can get in that mode for sure. And this is not to say that like some of the natural things that you raise, like, there being a ton of traffic, maybe these people just cannot respond, in the
Adequately or
instance
quickly
that
enough.
that we want them to, right? There's
Right.
just all these
We wish
things
all this
that
would happen just like
exactly
everything's taken care of. We
we
have the
want these to
best
be top
infrastructure in the
priorities.
world.
Yeah, we right. We want the damage and all these things to be top priority, right?
Yeah.
So that we can save the homes and save these people, save these families. And it begs those questions, right? But and I believe that, like, things do happen, right?
Yeah.
And this was all a good concoction and literally a recipe for the worst to occur, essentially.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that we're disagreeing with each other on that, but I do have a lot of unction that there are some things going on that are not good. And
Yes.
this is not a
Yeah.
natural, this is not all natural. This is not just climate change.
Yeah. Climate
I
change
have
is
reason, I
a
have,
different conversation in
yeah,
general. Yeah. Like,
sorry, yeah, but like I have a
no, but I
lot
hear
of
you. Yeah.
reason to
People are
believe that
believing
there's a
that it's
lot
just
more
climate
going
change.
on. And that is just like, it's like, let's
However
think a
much
little
so,
bit more this
I mean,
through.
that
That's a
conversation,
good crutch
yeah,
to
that
fall back on
conversation
every
is
time something
going to
happens in the environment.
perpetuate the news media for days, weeks, months, and even years from this whole situation, which I'm very interested to see what comes of it. I'm very interested to see how people study this and kind of draw
It's
back
just
and
like,
recognize, like, okay, was this the
yeah,
perfect storm because of the reasoning of planetary conditions? Like, is that really? Because at the end of the day, to give you context, I was in Temecula about a couple months ago,
hmm
and it was fascinating to see that I'm literally outside of this Airbnb and I'm stoking a fire. We got some logs, we got some wood, and we put a fire on and we were having like a little bonfire. It was beautiful. And I'm sitting
you were
there.
starting fires in Temecula. No,
Well,
just
think
kidding.
about it. I'm thinking about it, and I'm really sitting there having this fire go, and I
Yeah,
see that there's like gusts of wind that come periodically,
yeah, yeah,
and I can just notice that like so much ember is just being, tossed
yeah.
around just for my little
Yeah, yeah,
tiny
yeah.
fire. And
hmm
I'm in the middle of a desert vineyard area where there's a lot of, and I think one of the conversations that we even failed to bring up is that I think I was reading an article talking about how there was a lot of dead vegetation in the area that is also a perfect recipe for embers to be able to latch onto this brush and
Yeah.
to just kind of like stoke it. It just rapidly ignites. So I'm sitting here in Temecula and I'm reflecting on this now. And I'm sitting here while thinking about how that was so easy for me. If the perfect conditions were to be in that environment at that moment, I could have started a fucking huge fucking fire just by having my little fire, having enjoying my cocktail, having a s'more, and
Yeah.
not recognizing that like that gust of wind, if it increases by 10 to 20 miles per hour, this
Yeah.
fire is going to ignite all of this place just because of how fast these embers are flying by.
Yeah.
All that to say, my conclusive idea or my conclusive perspective on this is I don't know if, oh my God, I just watched the fire department just try to like neutralize this fire on this house with this huge plane dropping water, and it
Oh, on
didn't
TV?
even put it out. It just still is on fire, which is fascinating to see.
I'm sure it was water.
It looked like water because it
No,
was
I'm
just,
just kidding.
oh, but now it's freaking like, what is
Right.
it?
They're not even dropping
They're not
water.
even dropping water. Why are they trying
They're
to let this
dropping
house
Kool-Aid.
burn? They're trying to just kill everybody. No, but ultimately, I guess I agree with you. The questions are absolutely welcomed, and I think they're deserving. Even questions of the climate are much well welcomed and deserving. Simultaneously, I think I have a qualm with pointing fingers at individuals in this circumstance at this particular moment, and to immediately blame an entire administration for the lack of being able to stop one of the most perfect storm fires of our time in our era. And I'm like, okay, yes, it could fall on the fact that the systems in place weren't perfect or never perfect, but when are the systems ever going to be perfect to be able to stop any sort of situation? I mean, before 9/11, TSA was just not even existent in terms of like, yeah, come through, like whatever you want. Now the system is like hyperly focused on like, we're going to invest a shit ton of money in making sure nobody comes into a plane that's without shit that we already know what it's coming into, right?
Okay.
So it takes certain
Yeah.
circumstances for people to feel like, okay, like we need to make sure the Santa Ynez Reservoir has 20 million gallons of water. And then now we need to build a new pipeline. So then there'll never be a situation where so many people are trying to access one pipeline of water and that exhausts the pressure so that way no one can even use the water and things of that nature.
Yeah, so I guess my thing is it's like I don't think that the climate didn't contribute to the spread of the fires. Like I think that that's something that is
And I
like
don't
that's how
think that,
every
and I
sp
don't think,
that's how every fire
and
essentially
also I don't think it's
spreads
ruled out that
every year.
the condition, I don't think it's ruled out that the environment also could have been able to be the catalyst of a fire. The perfect storm requires the perfect environment.
So you think the fires just started themselves?
No, there had to potentially be a fire, but it wasn't necessarily like maybe something that you may think of like a guy running around trying to blow torch freaking trash cans. It could have been like a situation like me. I'm just having a fire and I'm like maybe making a barbecue or I'm freaking having a s'more at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. I don't know what the situation may be.
Whatever it is, I don't think that the fire started from somebody having a s'more.
But you can't immediately rule that out. There's no
Uh,
definitive evidence of anything at the moment. So you claiming that you don't believe it's that is just you leaning on a bias of, okay, well, I'm going to lean towards something that makes more sense to your positioning, which may be leaned upon things that aren't necessarily 100% validated at the moment.
like I said, I don't think these fires started from somebody having a s'more in their backyard, enjoying a cocktail with their missus.
At 10
I don't
a.m.
think that at
At 10
10
a.m.
a.m.
It's a Tuesday morning. You
I don't
never know.
think
This is the
I
Palisades.
don't
This is
think
the
I don't
affluent area. They have time.
I don't they got nothing but time. No, no, I can't sit here and say because I mean I heard that it started at a house that
No,
the first initial
like a
fire or
backyard
whatever.
supposedly, which
Yeah, something like that. So maybe it
that's
did
where I
start
was.
from a
I was making
backyard
s'mores in the
having a
backyard
s'more,
of an
right? And maybe
Airbnb in
that guy's sitting
Temecula.
here like, dang it, I just burned it. just
It's like, fuck.
oh, s'more.
That
I'll never have
that dude
s'mores
is
again.
quiet as shit right now. Like in these little camps where they're like trying to rehabilitate and trying to like get
Right. He's just
persons.
sitting
He's
there
just sitting
like,
there like
it's all my fault.
being quiet as cheese right now.
He's going through it right now. Hey, if you're out there and you hear this, man, hey, don't. There's grace
Yeah,
for you,
it's
man.
okay. Yeah,
We
grace.
forgive you.
Hopefully you'll be forgiven by your fellow peers and your fellow neighbors, but
Oh my
at least you're
gosh.
forgiven by me
Just don't tell anyone.
for like 20 years.
Right.
Let the houses try to get like rebuilt.
Just let it wait out a little bit. Wait till they revisit. Just be like, remember that one time.
All right. Well,
There's
another
there's
video.
a what? Oh,
Yeah,
hey,
go ahead.
there's a little bit more information as to like the funding of the fire department because that was a big touch point that which they may or may not have had enough resources in order to respond to these fires adequately. So there's a video that we wanted to touch on very quickly, just to kind of touch on that a little bit and see, and kind of hash it out and just see what really happened, and how shorthanded was the fire department exactly.
This is Kenneth Mejia, your city controller, here to explain to you all in 90 seconds how the city of Los Angeles went broke. Let's start in fiscal year 2024. So the mayor and a majority of city council, with the help of the CEO's office, budgeted a high revenue amount. And when the city of LA budgets a high revenue amount, they spend up to that revenue amount. And so what ended up happening in reality is that the city of Los Angeles actually collected $222 million less compared to what was budgeted for. Now, in addition, there were a few city departments that overspent. They were overspending over their budget by a lot. In addition, there were also record level liability payouts, mainly by a few departments who made up the most. And when you combine the less than expected revenues, the overspending by a few departments, and the liability payouts, that is a recipe for a financial disaster, which is what we saw and which is happening now. Now, what did the city of LA do to cover that revenue shortfall and that overspending? The city of LA ended up taking money from the reserve fund to cover that. In addition, they also ended up cutting the budget of many departments to fund those few departments and to cover that overspending as well. Now, this fiscal year, we're paying out record level liability payouts, and there's no more money to cut from other departments. Now we're looking to borrow money.
Finished?
Yeah.
Okay, so after watching this, I'm curious when these numbers were like published.
It's on right
as
now.
far as like the spending and the budgets and things like that, because Karen Bass, I guess, released that number, and then over the course of time, there was like, okay, this is how much. I mean, honestly, I don't really understand a lot of this stuff, but they're talking about like the revenue and how much they need essentially, and then how much was spent. And LAPD was among the top number.
Yes.
And I'm curious because when you talk about like how she relinquished a lot of funds from the LAPD and the police
I don't
department.
know if she did.
Well, she kind of, I feel like
she just came into, we
when
just
did
elected
she,
her.
when did she get into power? That's a good
Not too long
question as
ago.
well. Yeah. Like, so I have a lot of questions. Like who initiated the defund the police thing? Who,
Oh, she was actually 2022. Yeah, you're right, maybe.
and so it's like, what?
She came in 2023.
Yeah, I'm curious, and who was before her, and who initiated and kind of spearheaded the defunding of the police department, and then how was this generated in a sense that, like, how much did they need because they were defunded, and compared to how much liability needs to be now paid out because of how much money they probably borrowed to pay for whatever for the LAPD because they were defunded in the first place. I don't know, but we're essentially talking about the fire department. And this I feel like is interesting because I mean, yeah, of the timing. It's like, why is it that their funds are being allocated or elsewhere while they're not receiving the money that they need, knowing that we have an annual fire problem? You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I'm curious, you watching this, like, I don't know, how does this contribute to, I guess, how you feel now?
Yeah.
You know, of them not being able to respond accordingly. Like, maybe there's a reason why. Maybe they didn't have the resources that they needed because they were funded.
Right. So I was just looking up an article on CBS News right now while you were talking about it and while we watched that video and seeking additional information, because that all may sound absolutely detrimental and
I don't really know
immediately
enough.
correlated to the effect of like, oh, well, it is easy for us non-educated citizens that are not necessarily immediately intertwined with
I have more questions than I have convictions.
Absolutely. Exactly. My questions would be, okay, is this directly aligned with my preconceived idea of how things should act quickly in terms of a fire situation, and how this pre-assumed lackadaisical or neglect came to the forefront? Is that the cause of it? Because maybe they got defunded, but ultimately, I don't know how accurate that may all seem to be. I think it just raises more questions, and which is why I kind of literally Googled it while we were talking, and it was talking about how funding for the city's fire department decreased by 17.6 million, or just 2%, between 2024 and 2025 fiscal year, so the beginning of the year, and the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Okay, so from those two fiscal years, it reduced about 2%. However, the city council in November of just 2024 approved a 4-year, $203 million contract with the firefighters union to help boost wages, health benefits for the staff, and drawing from the budget's general fund, which may be exactly what this LA controller is alluding to, drawing from the reserves that they have. So then when I scroll back down a little bit,
there's limits to that, right? Because it's a reserve. Like, it's a funding that they're supposed to be able to like kind of get a little bit from if they need.
Check this out. Chief Kristen Crowley of LA Fire Department wrote in the Board of Fire Commissions and the budget cuts. The budget cuts have adversely affected the department's ability to maintain core operations. They have severely limited the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies. That's what she has, or I believe she has quoted saying. However, I think it's also indicative that we show that Hold on.
Yeah, the power of editing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so then in an interview with CBS News, Crowley said that in the response to the $17.6 million cut, the department reduced non-essential responsibilities, but added that the reductions did not limit the response to the fires to a certain factor. So that now Crowley is potentially maybe backtracking a bit. Maybe this is CBS just doing their writing. We did exactly what we could with what we had, Crowley said.
Which wasn't a whole lot and not
Something
nearly
that
as much
is
as they had
significant
before the
as
cuts.
this particular fire. I would say we threw exactly what we could with what we had. Interesting. Karen Bass is quoted in this article saying that there were no reductions that were made that would have impacted the situation that we are dealing with over the last couple of days. She also emphasized that the additional funds the department was set to receive from the city's contract with the union, the unprecedented wind and its ferocity that we haven't seen in years is the context in which we are dealing with this.
And so
the fire department overspent by an estimated $6.6 million in the 2023-2024 fiscal year, this year's budget shows, with unbudgeted contracts, unused sick time, and overtime accounting for much of the overspending. In a statement with the budget approved, Bass said that the city budget acted as a reset. This budget reserve serves as a reset in part by continuing to hire for critical positions, including police officers, firefighters, while eliminating some of the department's vacant positions, thereby prioritizing our city and family, blah, blah, blah. While the fire department budget was cut, the police department budget increased $125.9 million, a roughly 7% increase.
Well, think about it, because of since 2020, they lowered the requirements to become a police officer because everyone was leaving the force.
Yeah.
And so I imagine they bolstered a ton of funding because crime was running rampant in a lot of different cities. And so now they're trying to get back people on the force, and they're trying to put more funding and resources because of this. And so I can see where a lot of money has been put. Now that you mentioned that, I'm like, okay, that makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense. But like, I'm curious, like reading this, like,
okay, here we go.
Where is your mind at? Like,
Los Angeles County Sheriff total budget. In 2017, it was 3.32 billion. In 2018 is 3.2 billion. In 2019 is 3.35 billion. In 2020 it was 3.5 billion. This is now the cusp. This is now the precedent of COVID and all the protests. And then in 2021 it was 3.5 billion. And in 2022 it was 3.6 billion. So let me see. Interesting.
Because you're like, I know it's fascinating.
Because this video just came and we were just thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, well, you should talk about this one. And it does provide more questions on whether or not is this directly related or correlated to the fact that we just don't have the appropriate, or at least that they budget reset, as Karen Bass is quoted saying, the budget reset in the entire government spending in Los Angeles. Did it have any direct correlation to how we necessarily handled the fire situation? I don't know. That's a question we have to wait and see. But I think that might be nullified to some degree because, I mean, not nullified, but I think at the end of the day, there's a question to be asked on whether or not, okay, that could potentially be true of how this fire could have been waned out or stopped a little prematurely or a lot earlier if this were not the case. That could be something we draw up that is not conclusive, that is also like hypothetical. But at the same time, with the amount of firefighters that we have now, with the amount of attention that we have now, with the amount of borrowed planes that we have
Wasn't
enough,
with
the shit that we have now in terms of firefighters from across the country, planes from other countries, we're still at 11% containment. So I'm like,
it's too late.
With the extra couple, what was it? It was the extra 2% that the budget was cut. Would that 2% really have been a difference maker for our
It would have. I think that it would have allowed us to respond to it in a manner that would have prevented it from spreading as bad as it did.
That's a far-fetched statement. I don't know how true that could potentially be.
Okay, you don't think so?
I don't know.
I think that the time
because
that which
Tuesday,
the
bro.
fires
Tuesday
responded
night,
to.
Hold on. Tuesday night. I don't care how many firefighters you have. At 90%, hurricane winds with a fire is literally the perfect storm for the
Yeah,
craziest
but you
fire
don't
to
think
ever
that if
happen.
someone responds to any kind of fire soon enough, it can prevent it from spreading?
Yeah, but you think that's a 2% problem?
I mean,
That's the
okay, so
question at hand.
that's something that like obviously we can't answer, but you say okay, a 2% problem like that, that's not like that's a weird statement to make. A 2% problem. Like what do you mean?
But we're talking about
2% is
2%.
millions of dollars in
I
resources.
get that.
And
I
so
get that.
is that a difference in
Supposedly,
like
supposedly
preventing
when
a
I read
city from
reading
being
this
burned
article,
down?
supposedly they said there was only about like 50 jobs that were cut, 58 positions. Cuts, Crowley wrote in a memo from July 2024, resulted from eliminating 58 positions, adjusting sworn salary accounts, and removing one-time expenses. Some have pointed to the one-time expenses, such as the purchase of new breathing equipment for firefighters, or one of the reasons why there have been some reduction in current fiscal budgets compared to the year before.
This is what I'm saying. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know,
Yes.
right? Because like even
Yes.
from that article, because look, I've it's interesting because I've been in like unique instances where like this event happened, right? And it was covered, and then it was somehow like publicized in some way.
Mhm.
And then I'm able to look at the discrepancy of which this was reported
Yeah.
and being there on the ground level of what had actually happened.
Yes.
I understand what that
Kobe
I
being the number
understand what
one
that looks
source of that.
like.
Yeah, absolutely.
I understand what that feels like to see something happen in real time and then to see how it is
Being
now
portrayed and
being
being kind of,
portrayed.
yeah.
Yes, and what narrative is being latched onto,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like I understand what that feels like. And so we can read on this and have a PhD in fire, whatever,
Fire
fire
dynamics.
department. Yeah, it's like we can read it on it until we're blue in the face. What we do know is that budgets were cut and a fire happened that we weren't ready for.
And the question I would respond with is,
And we
would
have
we have ever,
questions.
would any department been ready for a fire at this magnitude? Which is something even Karen Bass. I'm not a supporter of Karen Bass, but
I don't trust her.
there is a valid statement to be said. I've never seen in my lifetime, and I'm a young individual at 30 years old. I don't know if any of my family has ever seen something like this. A fire with hurricane winds
Yeah,
and a desert of 0% humidity.
perfect storm.
It sounds like an absolute disaster. And that's what
Yeah.
obviously we're experiencing.
Yeah,
But that's what I'm
and
saying.
there's
I'm
no
like,
water. And there's just no water.
okay, hold on. That-
There's just
and
no
there's just an ocean right there.
right. Like
What are we doing?
I don't understand. And watch this. We will never fully understand.
Yeah.
But all I know is in about 6 months to maybe 3 years,
We'll get the
when
peak to peak.
stuff
We'll
starts
start to
coming to the light and
we'll
we
start to
find out
realize
that
that,
this
oh,
was
that
all
happened. That's what happened.
arsenic.
Oh
Just
my
kidding.
God. Or we start to realize that this was not.
Right, and
Yes,
Karen
you
Bass
know.
and Gavin Newsom was in on it,
Yeah.
and like we can start talking about,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, like you were right, you
But
know,
you know
like,
what's
we're all stupid.
Yeah.
No, just like
But it's fascinating enough to see that at the end of the day, I think what you're touching on is something that's super valid, is that in our life and in our society, there are players that play at a different level of obscurity, of highly trained skills. You know, this is what we watch on TV and movies.
For
These
sure.
actual individuals exist,
They get it from somewhere.
there is people higher
There
up,
are people.
and there are people that are higher up, and companies and corporations and institutions and organizations that have pull to move levers at such a ferocity and at such a unconscionable level that they can pull strings to make shit like this happen for whatever reasons it may be. And we sit here and speculate, and that's what we do on this show.
And watch this. And they no, that's so funny. but like and they just kind of sit back and watch and they control what it
They
is that
keep it
we
together.
see.
Absolutely.
They control like how
Absolutely.
we see it.
Yeah.
And there's people on the ground level like they're like, yo, like this happened, but their
Yeah.
voice doesn't really matter and it doesn't even really get it gets a 20-second segment
Yeah.
on, you know what I'm saying, on
And
a
that's
newscast,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like it's just
Oh,
just
that guy's
not.
a
And so
wacko. That person's
right,
a conspiracy theorist. Let's get him out
right.
of the show. And I'm
And
like,
so it's so I
it
take
begs
all
the
that into
question.
consideration that
It begs
like
the question.
in all my seeing, I could be being misled. and there's small little narratives that aren't picking up a whole lot of feed that could be very plausible, but are being like judged as misinformation, just like what's the name? The guy from Facebook, Zuckerberg. Just like he's talked about how these elected officials are putting so much pressure to not put out stuff that's actually true. And so you expect me to listen to them, because even there's articles that will say, hey, you know, and there's news clips and there's all this stuff that will back up and give you evidence from experts, right? But then years later, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, that was all bluff.
Can I? Go ahead. No, go ahead. I was just
gonna say, like, that to me is enough to leave a stain when something like this happens, to be like, I don't know.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I can't refute that. I think you're absolutely right. I think that perspective is spot on. I think the only thing that can help conclude this conversation is to draw a little bit of inspiration for our main man, Denzel Washington. Says, you watch the news, you're misinformed. If you don't watch the news, you're uninformed.
Yeah.
Oh,
tough stuff.
The duality of that, and we're in the middle of kind of it's a balancing act between those two.
Yeah. And all we know is that the block is hot. I would love to. I mean, I was thinking about, like, you know, volunteering somewhere, and
I thought about that.
I only have so much. I only have so much resources. I'm really, really far from everything, and I can only control what I can control.
Yeah.
I wake up, I pray every morning, and I'm
just
like,
have to pray
Lord,
about it.
please, you know, bless this city, you know, help those who can't help themselves, you know, and I pray that these elected officials, I mean, because the Bible always talks about pray for whoever's in power, because it's like they're the ones who are, you know what I'm saying?
The pieces.
Exactly. And so whoever they are, whether I agree with them or not, you know, it's my job to just pray for them and just pray that they make the right decisions, and then put the right people in power that are controlling everything, that, you know, they have mercy and grace on everyone below them.
Yes.
And then just kind of, you know, help whoever I can, you know, in any way that I can. And I think that this is a good conversation for us to just kind of like hash things out, you know, because there's so much going on, but I think it's important to have some resolve and to come to a conclusion of the matter, because information is not going to stop getting released out. But I think it's important to, like, have some peace and have a level head and understand that, like, everything that you're seeing may not be as it seems.
Yes.
And so turn the TV off sometimes.
Absolutely.
Like, I deleted the app, the Fire app. Like, I'm not finna, I mean, yeah, it's good to know what's going on, but like, I'm not finna sit here and get a notification every 2 seconds.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
this fire's happening here. This fire's happening over
It's
here.
ridiculous.
You know, like, I delete Instagram a few hours every so often just to, like, kind of shut out the noise, and I can get things done, because you can, even just like the pandemic, you can get in like an echo chamber where it's like disaster, calamity, blah, blah, blah.
Doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling. You can get caught in doom scrolling. And so, and this is why it's so important to, like, be able to have a good community around you and have some kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I think my faith definitely does this for me, where I know where I can go into a secret place, and I know that I can have peace regardless of what's happening around me. And also be able to spread, you know, love and joy to people that, you know, don't have the best of circumstances. And so I guess that is the conclusion of the matter as it relates to the fire. I mean, obviously stay cool. You know, come back to LA when you suit it safe.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for all those. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you guys